Kankakee Podcast is presented by Pewter Pros, Stitch Prints, and Digital World Design family of businesses, celebrating 25 years of small business ownership in Kankakee County. You can learn more at mypewterpros.com, stitchprints.com, and digitalworlddesign.com. Plus, now through March 15th, Pewter Pros is offering $50 off all refurbished laptops and desktops in store. All include 1-year parts and labor warranty. So go see Pewter Pros today on Industrial Drive in Bradley.
Thankful for awaiting stories. Hold on to the lifetime we won't get back. I know these rivers carry on. People tend to stick to you after time. Places tend to do the same as we do. This river carries on and on.
Hello and welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake LaMore, and before we get to today's wonderful guest, let's take a look at some upcoming community events. Tickets are on sale right now for KVTA's Moana Junior. Show dates are March 17th through the 19th. You can get your tickets at kvta.org. There's an Alzheimer's Community Forum coming up on Tuesday, March 14th at the Kankakee Public Library, starting at 5:30. It's absolutely free. You can learn more about the impact of Alzheimer's disease, risk factors, current research, and some valuable local resources here in the Kankakee area. We the People are presenting the Blue Gala fundraiser March 25th at the Quality Inn on Route 50 in Bradley. Tickets are $75 for singles, $140 for couples, and all proceeds will go towards Kankakee County Police Departments for needed equipment. Tickets can be purchased in advance at the Quality Inn front desk, Candy and Cake, and Joy's Hallmark. If you would like your community event to be mentioned here on Kankakee Podcast, you can email it to me at lamoremediallc@gmail.com for consideration. Now let's get to today's guest. This is a patron episode where someone has taken it upon themselves to donate or to pledge to our patron program, because if you pledge $100 or more per month to our patron program, you get to be a guest on an episode of Kankakee Podcast. And the second person to take us up on that is Bill or William. I don't know anyone that calls you William.
Nobody calls me William.
No one calls you William except the government, right?
We'll keep them out of this.
We'll keep them out of this. But Bill Perakis from Meineke in Bourbonnais, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And did I pronounce your last name correctly, right?
Depends on what side of the water you're from.
Okay, well...
Most of us over here say Perakis.
Perakis. Okay, I said Perakis, didn't I? But Perakis. Yeah, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
When you made a pledge, I was just extremely flattered to have your support, because you are so well known in the Kankakee County area. I mean, I know so many people that go to Meineke and get their car done at your shop, including myself. I started doing that probably around the time that I started working at the radio stations, and that's would have been around the time that I first met you. So probably 8 years ago at this point, somewhere around there. Not that it really matters, but yeah, I've always been satisfied anytime I've gone in there to take my car. So
I'm flattered. And again, the fact that you say that I'm well known, I mean, we just do our little thing over here in the corner of the world. And I have always been a fan of yours. I always thought you did a terrific job and been living through your life vicariously through Facebook and watching you grow and do different things. And the podcast has been terrific and happy to be a part of it.
Well, it's very flattering. And I think it's not just because you have Meineke, it's the fact that you and Meineke together give back to the community quite a bit. I feel like I'm seeing your name helping sponsor or endorse or just be a part of important things in the community. One of them being the Speedway,
Correct.
actually, because we know the Speedway, it's had its good and bad days, the Kankakee County Speedway. So, I mean, that's just the Bourbonnais Friendship Festival. The list goes on.
There is somewhat of a list now, and I've kind of lost track because a long time ago I had subscribed to the idea that I wanted to be able to do something for anyone that was in need that asked. And it might not be something elaborate. When I first started the shop, or when I first took over the shop 17 years ago, things were tight. There was about 3 or 4 years before we figured out the cash flow and started getting to a point to where we knew what to expect and were comfortable, and the shop's grown. But, we didn't have a lot of resources to be able to do a tremendous amount. But I never wanted to say no, and we started out with car wash buckets for benefits and things that people were doing to help and raise money. And it didn't cost us a great deal of money, but, we got to give something to somebody without saying no. We had been a very long time BBYSL sponsor, and that was probably the first local. It grew into other schools and signage on the football field over at BBYSL, things with Bishop Mack, things with, again, anybody that would ask. I don't know that we've necessarily developed a reputation for it, but I just try not to say no.
Now you're going to get so many calls now.
And that's okay too, because again, we try and do what we can for what we deem viable. It came from a long time ago. I started out in Chicagoland in Des Plaines, Mount Prospect area.
Okay.
And there was a restaurant, still is. There's a restaurant up there called the Choo Choo. And it's a little place where they bring your food out on a train. They've reopened under new management. I understand they're doing a great job. But I went there when the original owner had it.
Okay.
And it was kind of cutesy because the back of the menu actually had a story of how they started out. And they told about how Ray Kroc, who had built the very first McDonald's 2 blocks away from this particular location, had come in. And he was looking around the place and talking to the owner, and his comment to them was, I won't be any competition for you. I don't even have seating in my restaurant. And then the rest went on. Well, while I was there visiting that restaurant and reading the story, these 2 Girl Scouts came in and went up to the owner and asked if they'd buy a box of Girl Scout cookies. And the woman looked at him and said, I'm sorry, girls, if I did it for you, I'd have to do it for everybody. And I thought in my head, it's $8 in Girl Scout cookies, for crying out loud. Come here, kids, let me buy a box of Girl Scout cookies from you. And I took that experience and expounded on, hey, if somebody needed something and we could afford to help out, we would, and we have. And we've been very blessed to be able to grow into the fact that we could do things like help out the Speedway, help out Cruising the Square in Kankakee, help out with the Friendship Festival and all the other things that we do. Yeah.
I love that. I love that story a lot. And so I guess we should get to the beginning of you. I remember early conversations I had with you. You went to high school at Carl Sandburg?
That's correct.
Yeah. I don't know. Somehow I remember that because I just remember, I think the reason why I remember it is because that's where you started learning how cars work, or there was a program at that high school, shop program.
We had a terrific shop program. It was actually second. It envied most dealerships, environments, and it envied just about any vocational school that I had ever seen in my experience. We had a 10-bay automotive shop. We had a 3-bay body shop. And from freshman year on, I attended all the courses that they had. Matter of fact, through that automotive program, I was able to participate in VICA, Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. I had passed the test, I was accepted, and I was one of the 30 people that got to go down to Springfield and compete for automotive knowledge and testing and things like that. And that was in my junior year. Most people didn't make it until their senior year to do such a thing. After that, I had actually didn't think I was going to pursue automotive as my career. I had left and I had done some other things, and I had been working since I was 13 years old. I started out with family who had local businesses. We had a landscape business. We had a tool store. And with the tool store, I had the experience of traveling around the country, going to Iola, Wisconsin, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Carlisle, and Hershey, and all that.
For like different tool
There were different
shows?
car shows.
Oh, car shows.
Yep, there were car shows, and we'd set up a tent and we'd sell our tools there. Matter of fact, one of the people that were there that were very small at the time was Eastwood. Eastwood Manufacturing Company in Allsup, and they have several locations around the country now, but they were set up right down the street from us there, and now they've gone on to be a really big thing where folks that did the tool store had gone on to other things, which goes into the next. After we had done that, I had gone into insurance sales of all things at 18 years old, and I was selling health and life insurance and senior care products at 18 years old to people in their 60s and 70s. It really didn't interest me. So I had left that. I had had an opportunity to do some other things in the meantime. I worked for Darwin Furniture, delivering furniture.
Sorry, before you continue, I'm just curious, why didn't you stick with cars if you were so good at it?
Oh, I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
You're gonna, and what I guess what I thought was, that I don't know if I didn't think I was good enough or wasn't sure how to pursue it otherwise. And I had some opportunities where it looked like it was going to be very lucrative and not necessarily, the life that I'd gotten into, and thought, well, let's give this an opportunity. Let's give it a shot. If I didn't, I wouldn't really have the background that I have now.
Yeah.
And most of that really originated from sales. And what's funny is how that ties back into the automotive side. From health and life insurance, I went back to delivering furniture because I wasn't sure what else to do, and I wanted to get out of that environment altogether and not have to be thinking as hard. Well, while I was doing that, I made a lateral move over to a audio warehouse. It was called Highland Superstores at the time. Highland and Fretter were the Best Buy in the Circuit Cities of the day. And while I was working in the warehouse there, took care of a customer up front, and the manager, Paul Mazerow, he says, we could really use you on the sales floor. So he puts me on the sales floor over there. While I'm on the sales floor, the president of Saxon Paint and Wallpaper at the time comes, or the vice president of Saxon Paint and Wallpaper comes in, and he brings in his wife for a Walkman. And they wanted a Walkman at the time. We didn't have all the phones and everything else. And as I'm showing him the Walkmans, here we're looking at a $130 Walkman, which is the equivalent of, $600, $700, $800 phone today.
Yeah.
And, as we're talking about it, and I'm asking key questions about their needs and what do you want to use it for. And, I happen to mention, I usually don't offer this to anybody, but on a product like this that's this expensive, you're not buying a $20 or $30 piece, for $15 we can insure it, and anything happens over the next 3 years, we'll gladly replace it. And if this model's not available, you get the next upgraded model for the same value. And he looked at me and he's paused for a second. He said, I've never bought one of these things in my life, and I'm considering buying it now. How would you like to run my custom window department in the Orland Park store? Okay. So I went over to Saxon and I ran the custom window department. And that's where I realized the customer service wasn't for me at the time. I wanted to get as far away from it as possible, and I went back to college at Moraine Valley Community College. I got my associates in automotive, and I started in the automotive world because I thought I didn't want to talk to people. Now, funny enough, here I am working in the automotive world. I've got my little corner of the shop. I'm happy as a clam because I just have to talk to people 2 or 3 times a day, and the rest of the time the manager's going to take care of it. So one day and I started out at a Crestwood location, and this family had, at the time, 4 locations, and we grew it to 6, and I think now they're up to 13. They're a very successful family and very, very nice people that I got started with in the business that showed me the ropes on how to run a shop properly. Well, I got transferred over to the Orland Park store one day, which was their busiest location in the chain, or in their group. And I had an opportunity where the owner's son was running the store, and he was busy on the phone. He had a phone in each ear and taking care of a customer. And I had taken my customer out to show them what they needed on their vehicle. So I saw the estimate sitting on the counter. I just took it upon myself to go ahead and show them what they needed, sign at the bottom. Here, we'll go ahead and get started, have it done in an hour. He looked at me, dropped the phone out of his hand. He says, "You're not going back to Crestwood." And I became the assistant manager of Orland Park. A few years later, I had my own shop for them, which I ran for 3 years. Then I went on to be a district manager for Meineke. And then when Paul wanted to sell his shop here in Bourbonnais, I took the opportunity, and I've been here for 17 years.
Wow. So when you were working with that other group, was it Meineke or was it?
It was not actually. I started off working for Midas. When I was at Moraine Valley, there was a program, a job assistance program, if you will. And okay, you got through, you graduated, you got your degree, we'll help you get a job if need be. So at the time, Midas had just started having a relationship, trying to find new technicians. And then the other opportunity I had was a Goodyear Center. Well, when I called the Goodyear Center first, because I thought I wanted to go into more of a full-service shop, which at the time we weren't in that industry, the fellow that answers the phone says, "Oh, yeah, you can come in and talk to us if you want to." He didn't sound real excited about hearing from me and being new in the business. But as soon as I called Jim Bratcher over there at the Midas shop in Orland Park, he answered the phone. He was happy as a clam. programs. Oh, yeah, no, it's a new program we just started over there. We'd love to talk to you. Come on in. And that's where I was. And they treated me like family. For a while there, they called me Billy Bratcher because, you know, I was so closely related to the family there. And they really did a lot for me and my family. They were terrific people.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. I guess that just goes to show, and I feel like every time I walk into Meineke, or not even, I don't even have to walk in, a phone call, it's customer service. Like, that's why I keep coming back, is because the customer service is just outstanding.
I'm very happy to hear you say that. We try really hard to make that happen. I want people to be treated the way I'd like to be treated. I take each experience that I can think of, and I'm still learning. I mean, every day we find something new where it's like, well, maybe we should address this now this way because, you know, things have changed, times have changed, what have you. But every time I'm in a retail experience, I try and take that experience and think about how we could have handled it better in order to make it better for the person. It's not even my business, or it's somebody else's business that we're talking about.
But you go ahead and you apply that to your own business. You're like, oh, like I should keep that in mind for the next interaction I have at my own shop.
Absolutely. At
Meineke. So during that time, you're working up in Orland, right? Are you living in Orland, or you?
At the time, I was living up north. I lived in Tinley, Orland, Bridgeview. My family came to, most of my family's from the Oak Lawn area. Most of them lived within about a mile away from each other. We centered around St. Nicholas Church on 103rd and Costner. I came out, and really my first experience with Kankakee was actually by accident, and it was back when I was in high school. My friend Lance Grafen and I, he's actually my lead technician at the shop, we had gone out to Bridgeview to Haunted Trails, and we had started going, I don't know, I don't even know how it happened, but we wound up getting on I-55, and we're going to have to hurry home because we're going to be late and we're going to get in trouble. So we got off on LaGrange Road. We wound up going north on LaGrange Road thinking, oh, this doesn't look right. We better turn around and go back the other way. We got back on the highway and we just expected to see another exit. And I don't know what the heck we were thinking at 17 years old there. but we wound up on exit 113, which is Coal City, Kankakee. So here we are calling our parents at, where are you? The sign says Coal City, Kankakee. What are you doing out there?
They're like, you're way out in the boonies.
So at $2 worth of gas at a time, we made our way home, and here we were. Now, what's funny about my second experience with Kankakee was after that happened, my father shared a story with me about when he was in his 20s before he got drafted into the Army. My Uncle John, God rest his soul, was going to take him out pheasant hunting. So they come out to Kankakee to Aroma Park to go pheasant hunting. Well, you know, they're looking all over the place for where they can go, and here's no trespassing, violators will be shot, no trespassing, blah, blah, blah. So they come up on this place, and here's all these pheasants flying out of the bushes, and my Uncle John's in his glory, and he pulls over, he says, this is the place. My dad looks and says, what about the no trespassing sign? Don't worry about it. I'll just start speaking Greek, tell him I'm just off the boat, I didn't understand English, I couldn't read the sign. Now this is in the mid-'60s or so.
Okay.
So they go out there. My dad goes one way. My uncle goes the other. My uncle's in his glory shooting away. My dad can't hit anything. He decides, I'm just going to go back to the car. He goes back to the car. It's locked. He's like, oh, forget it. So he sits down next to a tree, opens up the shotgun, takes the shells out, and falls asleep. Well, next thing he knows, he feels somebody pulling on the gun. So he gets up and he grabs the guy's arm and knocks him on the ground, and it happens to be the game warden. So he gets up and dusts him off there, says, sorry about that, sir. So do you have any ID? He says, hey, actually, I forgot my wallet at home. They're getting the car.
Man.
So while he's in the back of the squad car, here's my Uncle John with an armful of pheasants. And as he's walking, he's tossing one to the left and tossing one to the right because he could see the game warden over there until he's got three in his hands. Well, it turns out they were on a pheasant farm.
No wonder why there's so many pheasants.
He thought he died and went to heaven. So after they get all settled, all right, fine, you're down to the limit there. You've got your ID, you've got your gun card. You're going to jail. So, whoa, wait. Isn't there anything else we can do? He says, well, and I don't remember the fellow's name. You can go see Judge so-and-so at the Aroma Park Legion Hall there and see what he says about it. So they get in the car, they go over to the Aroma Park Legion, and they say, we're looking for Judge so-and-so. And here's this big, tall guy with a bloody apron on. He says, what'd you boys do? But at that point, my uncle and my dad are being smart. Alex says, what do you care what we did? Where's the judge at? The guy takes off the apron, puts on the robe, and says, now you boys always want to tell me what you did.
Man,
So the
story just keeps getting better and better.
The icing on the cake was that when that was all said and done, he says, all right, boys, that'll be a $20 fine and $30 court costs. So what court? You want to wait until Monday to see it yourself?
And I'm sure that was something coming from, our Bridgeport area,
Oak Lawn, Chicago.
Oak Lawn, South Chicago, and then coming down here to where it's like little country living.
Honest to God.
Gosh, that's hilarious. Man. Well, you want to wait till Monday to find out?
You want to wait till Monday to see it yourself?
So then how did you catch wind of Meineke in Bourbonnais being sold then?
Well, I was Paul's district manager, and Paul Tetro was a great guy. His dad, Len, was on the radio for a long time there before he passed away, God rest his soul. And Paul and I would talk on a monthly basis there. And he was a store that always did well on its own. It didn't require a lot of attention, but I'd still come down and see him, 4 or 5 times a year. And we'd talk on the phone once a month. So one time he called me up. He says, hey, Bill, how do we sell one of these things? I said, you're full of crap. I said, no, I'm serious. So I'll come and see you tomorrow. And we made a deal, and I bought the shop from him.
You were how many different stores were you managing then when you were district?
I was up to 80.
Oh, whoa, man. You must have been traveling a lot.
I was. Not as bad as what the position had grown to be over time, but when I first started, we had about 47 shops in my territory, and they expanded to give me Michigan. I had Indiana. I was going into Sutton. And that was just from basically, Kankakee was about as far down as I went. And then they gave me the rest of Illinois, and by that time I was saying, this is a little bit too much, guys. And I was wondering what my next move was going to be, and then when Paul called, it was like an answer to a prayer.
Yeah, especially with, small kids. What ages were your kids by then?
Oh, all of my kids were under 15 years old at the time.
Yeah. So you're like, all this traveling is not working.
Heck, all my kids were under 12 years old at the time. What am I saying?
Yeah. So what's the first thing you remember then when you officially took over the Bourbonnais Meineke?
It really seemed like I knew a lot of people already, and I don't know if it was the time that I had spent here with Paul or that everyone was just that welcoming, but everything was really great. People were good to us. We were good to them. We had started expanding services, and that's really why Paul wanted to retire and get out. He had gotten into the business when we were mostly just a muffler and brake shop. He had expanded into oil changes. We, of course, did, alignments and things like that. But when we had to get into full service in order to survive, since some of the segment of our business was going away, mainly exhaust, he wasn't looking forward to making that change after having already done it for 15 years. So we had started adding services. We were doing maintenance. We were learning more about, everybody in the shop was learning more. We attended a lot more training, and we grew from there.
Do you have any recollection of any, the first encounters with anyone, well-known in the community that you can think of?
No, because I really didn't start meeting. Well, I really didn't know who was well-known and who wasn't, quite frankly, at the time. I would say one of my favorite influential people that I've met, and we're still friends to this day, is Howard Hayes. Now, Howard had the used car lot across the street from us there, and Howard had gone on to bigger and better things, and he was pretty much renting the lot out to somebody else. But Howard was a customer, and he was pretty influential in the industry. His dad was Ken Hayes.
Okay, I was just going to ask that if there was a relation there.
And I think it was Howard that really started introducing me to other people in the area. He got us affiliated with Clancy Gernon Funeral Homes, and the Clancys bring me their service vehicles as well as their personal vehicles, and we've met a lot of people through that. And then we started having a relationship with Olivet. And again, I'll say it's by accident, but obviously there's a method to the madness.
And what is the method to the madness?
Just wanting to do the right thing first, and then realizing later that, that was pretty brilliant. I didn't even know I was doing that crap, for crying out loud. For instance, Mrs. Bowling had come in one time to have a tire repaired on the vehicle that she was driving. And, remarkably, she'd come in by herself, whereas most of the time everybody was so busy that, they'd bring in Dr. Bowling's car or something like that for him, but she would make the time to come over herself. And, the tire was damaged beyond repair, so we had to order one for her. So she came in for us to install it. And she came up to pay us. And I said, you know what, listen, you guys do a heck of a lot for the community there. And, here, this one's on me. Let the school go ahead and have a break here for a change. And I don't know, they thought that was terrific. And I just thought I was doing something little there. And, we expanded from there to the point to where even now, we even contribute a very, it's menial in my impression, but to the school, they think it's terrific. We contribute a little bit each year so that they can use it as scholarship money for students that might have a hard time paying for their tuition, and therefore they've got a reserve fund in order to be able to help people in that respect. So that's
a great partnership right there, because everyone could use help getting through school. We all know how expensive it is.
Oh, for sure.
I know you helped put your kids through college, so you definitely know.
My kids did a really good job on their own. They're very self-sufficient. They've learned, but of course we've always done what we could for them. And again, I wish I would have had the resources that I had now when they were younger, but I didn't. So,
right. But you continue to give to the youth.
Oh, absolutely.
Through organizations or businesses, schools like Olivet. I'm curious to know, what is the craziest call you've ever gotten, or the craziest thing you've ever seen drive into your shop?
What's funny about that is what I think is crazy is very serious to whoever's calling at the time.
Yeah.
So I don't want to minimize or ridicule anything that anybody's ever brought to my attention that they think's a big problem that may turn out to be something less. Although I'll tell you a great story about finding noises. And I think to this day, I'm the guy that if you really have something that one of the guys are having a hard time finding,
you're going to be
I'm going to be the guy that finds it. So years and years ago, we had a customer come in with a Chrysler K car. It was the mid-sized, small, compact Chrysler that Lee Iacocca saved the company with. And we had done a bunch of work on the vehicle the week before, and he came back complaining that he had this tink-tink noise. So take a ride with the customer. Says, yeah, I hear it. Okay, fine. So we bring it in the shop. I'm taking everything apart. Everything's perfect on this vehicle. There's nothing making this noise. I can't imagine where it's coming from. 45 minutes later, I'm ready to give up on it, and I go to back it out of the shop, and I hear tink-tink. The heck is that? I grab the keys on the steering column. No, it's not the keys. They're not hitting anything. Still hear the tink-tink. So I open up the ashtray, and there's a brand new clean ashtray with a pack of Rolaids inside of it. And every time you would stop, the Rolaids would roll to the front of the ashtray and go tink, tink. So I put them back in there, and I pulled out front. I said, sir, you want to take a ride with me? I think I found your noise. So he got in the car with me there. I said, do you hear it? He said, yeah, I hear it. I mean, he was upset at this point. I opened up the ashtray, and I took out the Rolaids, and I hit the brakes. I said, do you hear it now? Do that again. I hit the brakes again. He says, I don't even know how those got in there. I don't even use the Rolaids. It's fine, sir. It happens all the time. Don't worry about it.
It's okay. Like, we all have had to use Rolaids at one point or another. Gosh, that's great.
Now, funny enough, 2 days later, I have this guy come in with a caravan and says, I just got my brakes done 2 weeks ago, and I hear this tink-tink noise. I'll take this one. I got it.
Is it Rolaids? Did you buy some Rolaids recently?
Funny enough, that one happened to be he had a furniture moving cart that was turned upside down so it wouldn't roll around, and it was near enough to the seat that the ball bearing wheel would hit the back base of the seat and go tink-tink.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that stuff.
Wow. Yeah, you're a master at this point then with those noises.
I'm still learning.
Yeah, what's the latest thing that you've come across?
The most unfortunate thing that we come across nowadays is the things rusting out from underneath everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know why we still worked on older vehicles back in the day, but nothing seemed to rust out like it does now. And we're real cautious before we suggest, $200, $300, $400, $1,000, $2,000 in repairs to look over and say, listen, are you sure this is a vehicle you want to invest in? Let me show you why, and make sure that we're going over with a fine-tooth comb just to make sure that the frame's not going to fall out of the darn thing in 2 weeks. And that's the most unfortunate thing, because nothing is cheap anymore. The used car market's gone crazy. Yesterday's $5,000, or I should say 2 years ago or 3 years ago's $5,000 car is a $10,000, $12,000 car right now. And if you try and replace it with something new, you're hard-pressed to find, something that you're driving now for less than $30,000 to $50,000. And that's not necessarily the way people want to go. So we help where we can, but we've also helped people make the decision to replace them too.
My question that I've been thinking is brand new vehicles today, how long are they going to last? Are they made to last? Just because it seems like almost everything in this day and age, and this is not a knock on anything, it's made to only last a certain amount of time just because things are made more to be disposed or easily disposed instead of how things used to be made where you wouldn't be able to deconstruct it.
And you're right. I mean, we used to have the TV repairman come to the house. Now we just buy another flat screen at Walmart for $3.99 or whatever the case may be.
Right.
Cars, though, you're not talking about a $400 or $500 television. You're talking about a several $1,000s proposition, and keeping them up can be just as expensive. Unfortunately, are cars better today than they were? Yeah, from a longevity and operating as predictably as you'd like them to. Absolutely. I mean, aside from a dead battery, when's the last time one of these things didn't start in the wintertime, for crying out loud?
That's true.
And they're very sophisticated. There's a lot of safety features on vehicles that just weren't there a long, long time ago. Yes, it makes it more difficult to work on. Yes, it makes it more expensive for certain repairs. And some vehicle brands are much better than others at being reliable and maintenance-free.
Which are those? Can you disclose?
The first thing, quite frankly, that I'll suggest to my customers when they're looking for a vehicle is a Toyota or a Honda, quite frankly. They're by far the least expensive maintenance vehicle if you do the maintenance you're supposed to overall, and the longest lasting without a major repair. Let me give a perspective to you. David Bruce recently changed hands, and they used to be a Cadillac dealership as well as Toyota. Well, I used to buy most of my GM parts through David Bruce, and they don't necessarily handle them directly any longer. So I used to spend $4,000 to $5,000 a month with them buying parts. Since they're mostly Toyota parts, I spend $300 to $400 a month with them.
Wow. Because you're not buying the GM
Correct.
Parts from them any longer.
Exactly.
Wow.
So how's that for an analogy?
That's a pretty good analogy. Yeah, that's pretty good. And I feel like that's nothing new, though. I feel like Toyota and Honda have had that reputation for quite some time.
I tease my customers with older Toyotas all the time. I told them, Toyota's got a recall on that, don't you? He says, no, really? I said, well, there's nothing wrong with it. They just wanted you to buy something new by now.
That's true. Yeah. Good point. And I've had Chevy cars for a while now, and I'm usually bringing it in for something, it seems like.
Yeah, but you do a pretty good job taking care of your car, and fortunately it doesn't surprise you a great deal.
No, that's true.
And that's really the key to any of them. If you do what you should, when you should, then they usually last a pretty long time. It doesn't really matter who the manufacturer is. Yes, some are less likely to have characteristic breakdowns than others, but all things considered, if you maintain it like the book says, like your manual says, and the little maintenance guide, then it's actually going to last a pretty darn long time for you without anything really significant happening.
What are some myths that are just a lot of people think are true, and it's just not true?
The best myth right now that people have a hard time getting to bed with is that a lot of vehicles require synthetic oil. And it used to be the mindset that synthetic oil lasts longer. You can go further on an oil change because it's synthetic oil. You can't. The technology in the engines today, which allow for so many mechanical moving parts to do things that other things used to do. And without getting too technical, specifically, there's a chain-driven component that allows for rotation inside of the engine, so that one way gives you more performance, one way gives you lower emissions. And when those parts start to wear or fail or get restricted, it has drivability issues and can lead to other parts failing. So taking that oil change all the way to the end of even just all the way to the end of what the maintenance reminder tells you can be devastating to some of the mechanical parts. The other thing that people don't always realize is in their maintenance guides, there's going to be normal maintenance and severe maintenance for a lot of different vehicles. That severe service maintenance, unfortunately, applies to anything that drives in our community. Most of the time, it will be if your vehicle endures any of the following, use the severe service maintenance guide, and it'll include driving in temperatures below 32 degrees, stop-and-go traffic, driving for less than 5 miles at under 30 miles an hour, driving for less than 10 miles at over 50 miles an hour. Whatever the characteristics are, if you qualify for any one of them, you qualify for them all. It doesn't matter. So with that, a lot of people think that, it's a 10,000 mile oil change on some cars. Not if you read the fine print.
So even if you got the synthetic oil, like the most highest performance synthetic oil in there, doesn't mean that it's good to have your car go for that 10,000 mile.
Correct.
Yeah. There's so many different
And that's
variables.
all based on your manufacturer's recommendations, which is spelled out typically in your owner's manual.
Yeah.
However, no, most of the time you'll find out that interval is a lot less despite using synthetic. And the thing about having to use synthetic is that it has certain anti-wear properties that's developed in it, like General Motors. Not only is it synthetic oil, but it's Dexos certified for vehicles newer than 2012 or so. So that being said, if you're not using that designated oil, it may not have the anti-wear characteristics and the cleaning agents necessary to keep all those parts moving, even if you are changing it early. The other question about higher quality oils lasting longer and things like that, they don't advertise that anymore. So for a little while, Mobil had the once-a-year oil change.
Yes, I remember that. Okay, maybe that was what I was thinking of, because I remember seeing ads heavily. It was with one of the NASCAR drivers, and they were promoting this oil that you just had to change it once a year, and that's it. So that's not a thing anymore, or it's just not being heavily promoted?
It's definitely not being heavily promoted because there's a lot of vehicles that wouldn't qualify for that, and if they did try and qualify for it, they would wind up damaging things because no oil is able to stand up to the particular environment that it's been engineered for. And, one of the things that I was saying about synthetic oils earlier is that most vehicles require it because of all those complicated valve components in there. If the oil doesn't flow properly at colder temperatures, it's starving it for oil and you're creating additional wear, and timing chains wear out prematurely. The guides break. We've taken apart engines where those guides have been falling down and fell into the oil pan, and the thing is just sloppy as can be. It's amazing the thing made it in there.
So what about electric cars? Have you touched any electric cars? Do you guys do that yet?
Yes, we have, and yes, we do.
Yeah.
Of course, until cars fly, they're gonna be rolling on something and they're going to be stopping with something. So, there's going to be a need for mechanical service, and they're going to be suspended by something. So there's going to be a need for mechanical service regardless.
Oh, absolutely.
However, electric cars get into a whole different ball game. I'm personally not a fan. I did own a hybrid for a while. I had a hybrid Toyota Highlander, and it was a great vehicle, and it was really maintenance free. I gave it up with about 80,000 miles on it to get my current vehicle, and it was terrific. However, from a longevity standpoint afterwards, I don't know, and again, what I don't know about it could probably fill an encyclopedia, but from a manufacturing standpoint, from a mining standpoint, I'm really not convinced why we haven't gone into hydrogen as a power source for vehicles and focused on that more frequently. I mean, it could be made with water, for crying out loud, and it does a terrific job. And
how does hydrogen power work then?
Well, hydrogen is an explosive gas. And as it's channeled into the intake system, it can run the vehicle just like gasoline, just like propane does for forklifts and some delivery vehicles that are powered on propane and things like that. It's an explosive gas and it works just as well. However, it can be created with water, baking soda, and 2 electrodes inside of a container is the most rudimentary form of creating it. If you were to create it on demand in the vehicle as opposed to have a tank that you filled up at a gas station, so to speak. So I really don't know why that technology didn't lead the way.
I guess because, right, you do, I think it's a lot of garbage trucks are propane powered now, or natural gas, one of the two.
Propane, what have you.
Yeah.
Sure.
So there are vehicles like that. So yeah, it does make you wonder. What's something that you really have come to really like as far as advancement in cars? I mean, there has to be something that you find.
The advancement, the technology is a blessing and a curse, actually, because it's wonderful to have all these things at a touch of a button and have everything do everything for you. And between the seat heaters, between the Bluetooth stereo, between the navigation systems, I made a joke on Facebook a couple of weeks ago. Do you believe that a few years ago we were printing up stuff from MapQuest and traveling like pirates?
Yes, yes. I've often thought about that because the what was so bad about that was there was so many times where the directions you printed out were not correct.
Oh, yeah.
And so you would get to where the address you put in where you wanted to go, you get there and it's not it's not the place. It didn't take you to the place you wanted to go.
And now what? You can't print out anymore while we're in the car.
Oh, yeah, no, you can't. What's something, I know there has to be some crazier stories or encounters that you've had come through your shop.
Crazy encounters that's come through the shop.
Yeah.
I think some of my encounters have been borrowed vicariously. I think one of the funniest ones was we had a customer that came in that we had never met before that was rather upset about their service, and they were holding a warranty envelope in their hands, and I didn't want to interrupt them because they were pretty passionate about what they felt at the moment, but it was for a competing shop across town. So I let them go ahead and keep on ranting and raving and talking and how we did this and did that and so on and so forth. And I looked at the envelope and said, "Ma'am, excuse me, I'm happy to help you out, and I'm sorry you had that experience, but that's not us." And she looked at the envelope and she looked at me and said, "Well, F you," and she walked out the shop.
Oh my gosh. Man.
You work with enough people, eventually you find some funny stories in it. I'm very blessed, though. Our customers are terrific. We work really hard. We're in a business that not everyone knows a lot about, that may know enough to just get by, and therefore there's a lot of negativity towards, being taken advantage of or told something that not. And, I've probably forgotten more than I remember about why we do the things we do to make sure that system is in place to help develop the trust. For instance, you walk out of our office door to come out and see your vehicle to see what's wrong with it if you're visiting with us. And in today's day and age, we take a lot of pictures and text them to customers in order to help understand the need for service. But when you walk out the office door, there's a pile of parts sitting there. And it's not because we're slobs, it's because that's where we put everybody's parts until they pick up their vehicle in case they want to see something we replaced. And we've been doing that since forever. But it's just easier to stack everything there. Here's the parts that we just replaced. Did you want to see them? Did you want to take them with you? I mean, you don't take my word for it. Here you go.
Right, here it is. Yeah, there's been several times where you've shown me things on any vehicle I brought in and be like, look, this is what we're looking at here, and be
exactly.
like, oh, wow. So it's not, and that's what I really appreciate. And I know almost everyone else appreciates that too, is just that's why the customer service is just top notch. I never feel like I'm getting taken advantage of, and the answers don't. Sometimes those answers can kind of change or they don't sound exactly clear, but they're always clear and concise when I go to your shop.
Thank you.
So there's no questioning what you're telling me because your answer stays consistent.
And we work on a lot of vehicles a year, and
how many do you know how many you work on a year?
Close to 5,000.
Wow. And
in that, if there's ever a time that we're mistaken, we own up to it. We don't make it your responsibility for our mistake, and we'll fess up to it and we'll take care of it. And we're not talking about a mistake like sorry, your car got on fire and it's out back smoldering right now. No, we're not talking about stuff like that. Yeah. But because everyone's so busy and we don't have the waiting customers like we used to, because service doesn't take just 30 minutes or an hour. Most of the time it's several hours. We try and be very concise with our questioning in order to try and focus on whatever the problem is, because we don't always have an opportunity to go for a test drive with you because you may need to go to work or something else has to get done. The grandkids need to get picked up, whatever the case may be. We mistook one noise for another. Yeah, we fixed a problem that we had. It was a legitimate problem, but it wasn't necessarily what you brought it in for. We do what we can to make it right. That's the only fair thing to do. Now,
you yourself are a car collector.
I am.
Car connoisseur. How many do you have at this point? I know you've got is it a 57 Chevy or a 56?
I do have a 57 Chevy.
Yeah. How many do you own?
Well, I have the 57 Chevy you spoke of. If we go from oldest to newest, I've got the 41 Chevy Master Deluxe. I've got a 50 Oldsmobile Rocket 88 with about 47,000 miles on it.
Wow.
That's all original. It even has the crayon marks on the frame still where it indicated V8, so that on the assembly line they knew what to expect was coming into it. All that stuff's still on there.
That's cool.
The 57's next. I have a 63 Corvair that I'm working on putting together. I have a 65 Corvair. I have a 68 AMC Rebel. My wife has an 80 Corvette. I have a 78 Cadillac Eldorado Baritz that I bought from my uncle before he passed away, who bought it brand new in 1978. It's got 7,000 miles on it to this day.
What?
Yep.
Did he just not drive that thing?
He bought the car as the last of the big ones. It's going to be worth big bucks because they're not going to make them like this anymore. And he went into the showroom floor at Shirey Cadillac in Oak Lawn and bought this car. Yellow cushy leather interior, yellow tinted moonroof. He even painted the garage floor yellow and put down 4 pieces of carpet where he parked the car.
Wow.
And for years, that was kind of the running joke. It only came out once or twice a year that we'd see it at a holiday or something like that. And there's Uncle George with the car. Hey, Billy, how you doing? You like that car? It's a good car. Yeah.
I'm thinking this thing is like a boat, right?
Oh, it's huge.
It's
all of 21 feet long.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yep. Almost end to end in the garage.
Yeah. Where do you store all these things?
I was fortunate that at the beginning of I bought a house that has a big garage. That's the short answer to it. I was fortunate to find it at the beginning of COVID. We were kind of bored at the shop, and I used to sell houses on the side when I was working for Meineke. I was also a realtor. And, so every now and then I'll click around and see what's for sale and what the values of properties are going for. And I happened to trip over the listing for this house. Well, the day that I was looking at it, I was at the shop. There was nothing really going on because everyone was kind of hunkering down. And Doug Anderson, the Kankakee County tax assessor, came in. So what are you doing, Bill? So what do you think of this house, Doug? So I think we should go look at it. I said, I haven't even called the bank or anything. He said, don't worry about that. So he takes me to see the house. And I say, it's terrific. It's what we want. He said, you don't want to see anything else? I said, no. I said, here's a check. Let's go ahead and put an offer in on it. Well, it was odd the way the listing was on the house because it was on the market last year. And then it was off the market until March. And then March came around. Well, I found out later that the woman who was selling the house loved the house so much that she didn't want anybody trampling through it with their shoes on in the wintertime. So she took it off the market from November until March, and then it had just gone back on the market again. Well, lo and behold, we had put the offer in on the house and talked to the bank, and everything was fine there. Well, 3 more people had put offers in right behind us. So she looked at the name there, and it turned out Mary was affiliated with Annunciation Church. So she calls up the church over there and says, tell me about this Bill Perakis kid. Is he any good? So they vouched for me there, and she accepted our offer over everybody else's, and we had the house.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I guess it pays to go to Greek Orthodox Church, right?
Yeah, it's not what you know, it's who you know, I guess.
Oh, my gosh. And I'm sure that's a question you get all the time with your last name being Perakis, like Greek. Are both sides of your family?
I am the first generation born in America. Both of my parents are from Greece.
That's amazing. Yep. So there's got to be some stories there.
Oh, I've got a few stories about that. What you got to imagine, I don't think anybody, unless they've had anyone come into America in any recent times, that they can speak to the people that did to understand what they endured in order to make that decision. And you can talk about Canada, you could talk about Mexico. That's kind of right next door, and it's more familiar to us in today's age. But when you're coming over from Europe, all right, this is an airplane ride or a boat ride that you have to save up years in order to accomplish. And this is in the 40s. So a picture, it's World War II. My grandfather, who actually, I'll tell you another, I'll segregate over to that in a second. My grandfather owned a business in northern Greece where my family's from, and he blacksmith and whatever needed fixing he could fix. He actually mentored a lot of people in the area. When I used to go to church in Joliet, there was a parishioner there that knew my grandfather, and he was about 9-10 years old, and my grandfather would show him how to do this, that, and the other. And I actually have a plant stand that he had made at his own blacksmith shop at his home on his farm in Plainfield that he gave me, and I have it in my yard. It's the closest thing I have to my grandfather actually making something, because my grandfather showed him how to do it.
Wow.
But now it's World War II. The Germans and the Italians have invaded northern Greece, and they decided they're going to stay at my grandparents' home. So amongst the 10 children that they had, because my dad comes from a family of 10, my grandfather was an orphan. He never wanted his children to ever know what it was like to be alone, and he and my grandmother, God rest their souls, had 10 children. So he was then asked, quote unquote, to assemble whatever munitions were being brought into northern Greece. So, and they told him they'd pay him and everything's going to be great, because that was kind of the storyline, in the beginning there. So the soldiers come up to pick up the first wares, and he says, well, where's the money? So we don't pay you. You work for us. He shuts the doors to the barn, puts a padlock on it, folds his arm. You don't pay, you don't get. So now they got the machine guns out pointed at him there. My Uncle John, who's about 9, 10 years old, goes running down the hill. They're going to kill my father. And fortunately, the general that was at the house there wasn't quite the Gestapo that you see on the movies and everything. He went up and, no, it's okay, and paid them and went on their way. But, that was the life.
He's lucky because, right, in the movies, we all know what usually happens.
Absolutely. And, I don't know enough stories to know if they saw things like that. I just know that they were encouraged enough that maybe this life in America isn't such a bad idea. So here's the point about, moving. Sometimes we're hesitant to move across town. My grandfather came over to America first. Got a job in a steel mill doing welding because he loved the welding and whatnot. Saved up enough money to send for my grandmother 2 years later, a year and a half later. And then it took another 2 years for the two of them to be able to afford to bring the kids over.
So who do the kids stay with?
Family. The oldest, my Uncle Tony was the oldest. He kind of took over at that point there. So, yeah, you're leaving your kids behind so that you can afford to ship them over to America. And I think they finally came over in 54 was the last batch of them at that point. So, funny story about all that. It was a few years after I had the shop that I was sitting with one of my aunts, and my Aunt Pat was telling me, he says, Billy, you're the only one that took on your grandfather's passion. I said, what do you mean? Well, when he came to America, he always wanted to open a muffler shop. So you're kidding. And she told me the story about what he wanted to do. And unfortunately, my grandfather died before I was born. He died of lung cancer in 1967. So I didn't have the opportunity to meet him personally. But again, always very highly spoken of, very, very well respected in our community and people that knew him.
Wow, that's incredible. It's amazing that you get to kind of carry on that legacy, something that he always wanted to do, and you didn't even know it.
I had no idea. Evidently, that's where I got my passion for wanting to fix things and be mechanically inclined, but I had no idea until then.
That's great. And I'm sure, given, with the Greek families being so intertwined with each other, I'm sure even probably when you started going to church here in Kankakee, you probably met some connections there.
Oh, absolutely.
I would imagine.
Matter of fact, Father Nick, for that matter, was the priest in Oak Lawn there. And my aunt just made 2 weeks ago the basilopita that we cut at the church, or the bread that we have for in honor of St. Basil that they cut. So my Aunt Pat made that for them, even though she's out in Oak Lawn. So, yeah, everybody knows everybody eventually.
Yeah, and that's what it seems like, especially with the Greek community. And I don't know if is that just because everyone's so tight knit, or is it just how is that? How does that work?
I'm going to say yes. However, there's a lot of us, but it's a big, small world, and we tend to be invested in each other's lives, either through marriage, through being godparents, growing up together, what have you, and somehow we've stayed pretty tight. And then you start talking to people, and you realize that you knew people through people, and I guess it's kind of like going to a big high school and realizing that you were friends with somebody that you didn't know you were friends with, but it's a similar situation. But no, we are passionate about family. We're passionate about that lineage, and I guess it's fresh enough for us that we still kind of carry on some of those traditions, whereas things time to, I don't want to call it be Americanized, but some of the older European traditions kind of wane off as you start to get into, the next generation and the next.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some things that you've kind of made your own at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
So what are some of your favorite traditions to extenuate through your family and your kids and grandkids?
Easter has to be the biggest tradition, if you will. My uncle, who was the young man that was running down the hill as a child there, had Easter at his house until he passed away, and then his son Stephen took it over after that, and we always all try to get together at least for that one holiday and combined family reunion / Easter celebration. That's probably the number one thing that I think my kids will take on with them that they'll remember and pass on. And we have other traditions too, and they tend to revolve around church, quite frankly. But that's probably the biggest family event. Now you know where I'm from. You know my family.
Yeah.
I appreciate you asking me about the business. Again, I'm always flattered that you...
Oh, yeah. Well, no, it's just, I've luckily, I've had more great experiences with car mechanics just in general than I've had bad experiences.
Good.
And I guess getting back to that, though, because I'm sure people get in situations, maybe they're second guessing the mechanic that they're at now and they're wanting to know some red flags maybe, or, so what are some red flags when something...
It should be transparent is really the bottom line. There should be a willingness to be able to talk openly about a situation and be able to admit when you're wrong if you're wrong. We never try and argue a problem behind the counter. Let's get the car in the shop. Let's find out what's wrong and go from there. We try not to diagnose it over the phone. I mean, we can give you a couple of ideas of what we think it is, but ideally, if we don't look at it, it's kind of like asking your doctor, why does my foot hurt? I can't really tell from here, So that being said, transparency and willingness to be able to, be real with people. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Fix it, move on, get on to the next thing. Nobody needs to. I don't remember the last time I've had anybody that was irate with us. There shouldn't be any reason to. And again, if that situation ever comes up, it may be someone that doesn't know us well yet, but they will by the end of it. And therefore, their impression is changed at that point. And again, we're talking about circumstances that happen once or twice a year. Mm. However, advice to people that are working with people with their vehicles, there should be transparency, there should be honesty, there should be ways to substantiate the claims and therefore make it reasonable, logical, and understood.
And I was going to say, Amber, who you have working for you now, she hasn't been there super long, but she's awesome. I've been meaning to tell you that. She definitely kind of carries out your, I don't know if values is the right word, but just how you execute your customer service. I feel like she just does that so well.
I'm so glad you noticed because she absolutely does, and we're very, very blessed to have her. Funny, when we first met, she came to the shop because the person that she was using for daycare, they're our customers. And she was traveling up north to countryside to work at another shop. And she had made comment how, that she was settling here and didn't want to be making the drive any longer. And they suggested she come and talk to me because it was maybe 2 weeks ago that, they noticed me running the shop by myself and, asked if I'd ever consider having anybody on. So they sent her in and she came to talk with us. And she and I, my wife and her boyfriend went out to dinner and talked about the business and asked her questions about what she knew. And, she impressed me enough that I made her an offer and she was willing to accept. Funny thing is that she's very modest. And she was afraid that she wasn't going to be good enough. Quite frankly, as she reminds me of myself when I was her age, when I first started in the business and running stores, but she's better. And I let her know that.
She's top notch, I think. I mean, anything that she tells me, I don't second guess it. I just know. I'm like, okay.
She's well spoken. She also went through the automotive program at Moraine Valley Community College.
Oh, okay.
As a matter of fact. And not only that, but I found out recently, again, talk about being modest, found out recently when she had to go to the meeting, she's invited back twice a year to be part of the student advisory council to the automotive program at Moraine Valley.
Okay. Yeah. So she knows her stuff.
She does.
And she's very good. And yeah, I feel like if you're gone, if you're not even around, I'm in good hands. Like I definitely feel that way.
Indeed you are. And at first, everybody that called would ask for me and, they didn't know any better. And, after a while now, they're starting to ask for her. Here, Amber, the phone's for you.
You don't need, but you don't need me.
And I appreciate you bringing her up. And I know that you know her by first name by coming in and utilizing our services. But everybody that we have there is great. It's the best crew that I've ever had, and I'm very proud of all of them. I do as much as I can to make sure that they are well compensated, well fed, comfortable. They have families. They need time to do what they need to do. We try and work that all in. It's all part of the deal.
Right. It's hard. It's a balancing act. It's hard to do all those things, but it seems like.
But again, none of this works without them, and they're terrific.
Yeah. I guess I just want to close out and just saying thank you so much for your support and, seeing how passionate you are supporting all the different community organizations that you support. It's definitely inspiring and just flattering to have your support as well. I guess the only other thing we didn't get into is just all your amazing dad jokes and,
the sign.
Yeah. I feel like we need to have just like a separate segment of just Bill from Meineke reading jokes from his sign.
That's right. Your car's not foreign to us. Tell us your sob story. The sign, funny enough, we always had a reader board out there, and I wasn't sure anybody was really paying attention to it. And then I got the electronic reader board where we could switch it back and forth pretty easily from the comfort of the office instead of going out there when it's 10 degrees on a ladder. And one day I decided to say, how effective is this stupid thing? Is anybody really reading it? So I put free brake pads on the sign there. And I even had people in the office that never paid any attention to it, never asked about it or anything like that. So I thought, this is ridiculous. I'm not using this for sales promotions. Nobody cares what's on sale or what we have this week. It's not like I'm selling pizzas or anything. So the heck with it. We're going to put funny stuff on there that maybe people will pay attention to. Holy cow, do they pay attention to it?
Dude, I hope someone is writing down your great marketing right there, because that is genius. It's just a reminder that we don't have to specifically market our product. We can just, because obviously those jokes has nothing to do with the car.
We take ourselves way too seriously. It's nice to have confidence and not necessarily go about it in such a way where everything's got to be business.
Yeah, and that's what I love about. I'm always excited to see what the next joke is.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
I'll try not to disappoint you next week.
I think everyone else because you started that, was it right around COVID when that hit? Yeah, and so that was a great time to start that up. It was just having these ridiculously silliest, lamest jokes, but those are the ones that are the funniest. I think the best one was one of the more recent ones from this last week about the Bryan Adams or
I lost my pizza cutter, I used my Bryan Adams CD. It cuts like a knife.
It's so bad, but it's so good.
The one that we got the most hits off of actually was, I don't remember what the world was arguing about in the media, but I had put up there, now at Walmart, CBD-infused toilet paper so everybody can calm their butt down.
Oh my gosh. Man. Well, Bill, thank you so much again. And yeah, if there's ever a time you want to come back, you're always welcome to come back. And
thank you.
And thank you for your support.
Thank you for having me.
That does it for this episode of Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake LaMore. Thank you so much for listening. Kankakee Podcast is proudly presented by Pewter Pros, Stitch Prints, and Digital World Design family of businesses, celebrating 25 years of small business ownership in Kankakee County. You can learn more at mypewterpros.com, stitchprints.com, and digitalworlddesign.com. Plus, now through March 15th, Pewter Pros is offering $50 off all refurbished laptops and desktops in store. All include 1-year parts and labor. Warranty. So go see Pewter Pros on Industrial Drive in Bradley to check out that sale before it's gone. Also, a special thank you to our patrons for helping make this episode possible, including Don Geisinger, Diana Crowley, Joseph Lamont, Bill Perakis, Lori Crayoch, Karen Bishop, SLS Home Inspections, Seth and Mary Berkey, Jake Lee, Jesse Arsenault, Dave Barron, Veronica Featherston, John Sullivan, Sue Hornung, Samantha Rochnowski, Lake Iverson, Travis Garcia, Jane Bostwick, Dawn Harrison, Simon Toplis, Scott Wright, Carrie O'Connell, Jamie Race, Joanne Berry, Anthony Vicelli, Eric Olson, Nolan Bukowski, Natalie Flagel, Carl Earps, Jeff and Rosa Carroll, Teague Dreenan, Sandy and Steve Twait, and Rose Lucky. To become a podcast patron, go to KankakeePodcast.com and then click on the Patron tab. If you pledge $5 or more per month, you'll also hear your name announced on an episode of Kankakee Podcast. There's also extended versions of episodes available, video versions, and much more for our patrons. Our theme song was written and performed by Lupe Carroll and recorded by Daniel Bishop. Also, additional editing for this episode was done by our intern, Colin Furrow.